Listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Very pleased that Rabbi Yisroel Bernath joined us as spiritual director of Chabad of NDG in the Jewish Chapel of Concordia University. He is known as the Love Rabbi, and he was Canada's only finalist for the Jewish Community Hero Award, known as the Love Rabbi. He also has made 54 matches. He's formed J Matching International, a network of Jewish dating sites. You can also watch him on television. He's a film and TV star. He starred in CBC's hit documentary Kosher Love. He's innovative and he's creative. So, Rabbi Yisroel Bernath, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, tell us, how did you end up becoming the Love Doctor?
First of all,
the Love Rabbi, I should say.
I want to tell you that I hate that moniker. It's so funny because people will often call me and they'll say the Love Rabbi, and they look at me and they say, you just don't meet the kind of person that I would think would be the Love Rabbi. And so I dislike the moniker, but I'll do it for the Jewish people. Whatever.
Well, it's on your website. It's called the Love Rabbi. I love the idea. It gets it out there. Are you competing with Shmuley Boteach?
I don't know him, and I definitely not competing with him. But I've heard that a few times.
Right, because he also was involved. But here you are. You're made 54 matches. That's an amazing amount of matches. What's your secret? No wonder they call you the Love Rabbi. But how did that all come about?
So it came about 15 years ago when I arrived in Montreal, and I realized that there was.
Where'd you come from?
I came originally from Chicago, and I realized there was a huge need. There was like this gap here, and there were this kind of the emerging of what today is known as the young adult or the young professional, and they were not meeting in the same way that they used to meet maybe before that. And so I had no idea what I was doing in the beginning, and just kind of just was trying to be, a good rabbi / Jewish community person, and putting people together, you to you, oh, you have a nose and you have a nose. Okay. It's got to work. And, a real belief in marriage and in long-term relationships kind of driving that desire for young people to meet each other. And as a result, you make one match, great. You make two, you make three. But over time, if you want to make many, it goes from, let's say, necessarily a talent or something that you would think that would just be out in the air to something that's actually a skill. And so today, I would say it's a lot more skill-based, it's a lot more focused, it's a lot more, trying to figure out who's for who and what's good for one person or for another.
Because today it would seem that with all the technology and the swiping and the dating apps, that it'd be easier for people to meet. From what I hear, it's much more difficult. So even you have this all new technology, so people, I guess, are looking for ways, and there's nothing like the human touch in matching.
I would say that. I think that the algorithms are great, and I do use some technology and some algorithm, but at the same time, there's nothing like getting to know each other. Look at this conversation that you and I are having now, like getting to know each other. We don't know each other before tonight, and perhaps over the next little while, we'll get to know each other. There's a power, even through this medium, through the phone, through Zoom. We can use technology, but there's something about that contact, of that personal contact.
So, but still, to create 54 matches is no small feat. So you can put people in the room and say, okay, in fact, Reverend Sun Young Moon, the Moonies, he made matches. I think he made 1,000 or more matches at a big wedding in Madison Square Garden years ago. He was a cult leader. Unfortunately, a lot of Jews that joined the cult, but the next day you have people with broken arms and fighting. So there's
It's
an
the
art
old
to it.
story from
For
from
the
the
Gemara,
Talmud,
right?
exactly.
So tell us your secret. So how you can look at people, yeah, and how do you know that this one's going to work because it's an art, and you weren't trained with that. They didn't teach that in Chabad school, right? That's so
I don't think they teach that anywhere. And
right.
that's actually something that bothers me a lot. There's a lot of very good and well-intentioned people who are out there and they're doing their best, but I think it's a lot of shots in the dark, this and that. So
Like you said, this one has a nose, that one has a nose. Okay.
yeah,
So
exactly.
so tell us your secret.
So for me, there's a couple of different, obviously there is some kind of an intuition. You get to know someone and something about one person reminds you of something else, but that's not enough. That's maybe enough for what I call the matchmaking spark. Like, oh, that would be interesting. But what then I do is, and there's a lot of systems that could be used, but the system that I like the best is what's called the Big Five personality traits. And the Big Five personality traits are five kind of complementary ideas. For example, extrovert versus introvert, right? So I'm not saying this as a whole, but often you'll find in a complementary couple, one will be a little more extroverted and one will be a little more introverted. One may be a little more open to experience and one may be a little more closed to experience. And these are kind of complementary ideas that together, it's really good that one be a little more introverted, one a little more extroverted. If they're both very extroverted, when are they going to be in the house? And if they're both really introverted, when are they going to get out? So these are, again, if you see two people as kind of, the Jewish idea of two halves of a whole, but you see the whole as actually these kind of complementary ideas, then what ends up happening is you see that if one person is one way, they actually can fit with someone who would be complementary to them. Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying. You're saying to a certain degree, opposites attract. But I'm not. But there's
no, not necessarily opposites.
Well, if somebody's introverted, somebody else extrovert, it's an opposite.
It's not an opposite. It's a complement, which means if you look at two halves of a whole, and if you look at the entire picture, and you see two people being an entire picture, so there needs to be an introvert and an extrovert in a relationship. So it looks to you, or maybe to an individual, if you're looking at one person as an opposite. But if you look at two people creating a unified whole, they're complementary.
Now, are you matching up religious people, non-religious people? Let's look at a profile. Are they mostly Canadians? Is it United States? Let's look at the overall picture.
So today, I used to say the religious, they have it all figured out. There's enough matchmakers out there. Why do I have to deal with the religious? And then so I was only doing more secular. The idea of two Jews dating one another means they're not dating a Gentile. So that was the beginning of it. But today, as you and I both know, it's not as simple for the Orthodox, especially the modern Orthodox, and people are having a harder time than they used to. It's not as simple. The matchmakers who used to be really successful, they're having a hard time with this generation. And I'm not saying that I'm having it any easier, but I think there's more people that need to get out there and need to be part of the conversation and be part of helping those people find others if they are interested. And I say that it's a huge caveat, because you can't be hungrier than the person to make that match. And I think a lot of matchmakers traditionally used to be hungrier than the people they were trying to match.
What do you
And
mean by
today,
hungrier?
which means they wanted the match more than the single. They were pushing. There was an old saying that the shadchan used to stand for sheker, davar, kesef, notain, right? That false words, and they're taking the money. And there was this idea that, I really believe this person, you had to sell the match. Well, that's not working for today's generation. Either they want it or they don't want it. And I think the hardest thing is kind of weeding through who are people who are not looking for a long-term relationship. If you're not looking for a long-term relationship, there's lots of options out there. You don't need my help. But so weeding through who's not looking for a long-term relationship and who is looking for a long-term relationship. And sometimes it takes having that really, what I call the come to Moses moment, having that heart to heart, having that real conversation with someone and saying, who are you? What's going on?
So is it mostly your students that are on the campus, or are you getting requests from America and elsewhere to do the shidduch, to arrange for the matches? So is it local? Because you have an international dating service as well. That's why I'm wondering.
Right. So it started off locally, and definitely because I'm in Montreal, there's no question that I try to focus on in Montreal. But now I've trained quite a few matchmakers, and our network has grown tremendously. There's about 30 matchmakers, not only myself. There's no way that we do help singles from all over the world. Definitely North America focused, but all over the world. And we have different people in different cities who are focused. So the network has grown today, and we've been able to kind of catch on to other networks as well, to try to be able to expand the pool of singles. We work very closely with Mark Goldman and Saw You at Sinai, and some of the other sites and profiles and networks that exist out there, to try to be able to expand the pool as much as possible.
So if you yourself made 54 matches and you have 30 matchmakers out there, so you probably have a lot more matches that are attributable to you. If each matchmaker made at least one match or two, are you keeping track of what your disciples, what your trained matchmakers have been doing and how successful they've been?
So for me to say that I've made a match, it has to be me personally setting up the two people. So that's, it's not, if somebody in my network finds someone, for me, that's not a match. It's very hard. Obviously, we deal with all types of people. Sometimes, especially in the secular community, you don't find out for years and years. I was actually, I'll just tell you, I was walking down the street over the summer, just a few months ago, and I see two people there, and this is post-pandemic. And so I said, oh, hi, how are you? Nice to see you guys. This is a couple that I set up about 5 years ago. Oh, really nice to see you guys. And like, oh, how's everything going? Oh, yeah, everything's good. So you're still together? Wow, it's amazing. You're still together. Yeah, we got married about 5 months ago. I'm like, oh, thank you for inviting me.
You get invited to the weddings that you've set up, to the matches that you set up?
Not that one.
Obviously, but is that the tradition that they invite the matchmaker? They invite you? I wonder how it is in secular Jewish society. In the religious community, I guess you probably would be. I'm just wondering if the more secular Jewish individuals would have that same custom.
Very often the secular ones, because I'm a rabbi, will ask me to officiate. I would say more often than not. But yes, I will often get invited. I would say, a lot of people feel like that's their Genesis story. That's their story. Oh, this is the person who introduced us. And what ends up happening, actually, what my original network was, I would set up a match, I'd get invited to the wedding, and then the couple would say, oh, this is the rabbi that introduced us. And all of a sudden, I would get bombarded by all the singles at the wedding. Oh, can you set me up? Can you set me up? That's how it started.
So in other words, you set one person up, and that's how it opened up a chain. Did you envision yourself when you became a Chabad rabbi? You came from Chicago, came to Montreal, that you'd be doing all this matchmaking? Was that part of your thinking at all? Not
even a thought. No, absolutely not. Definitely not.
So
I could think of a lot of things I would be doing, but not that.
It's, I guess, mitzvah gereris mitzvah. One good deed gets another good deed into motion, right?
And I still don't consider myself a matchmaker. I'm not that typical. I don't know. Maybe somebody during a recent film screening, somebody said, "How does it feel to be a man in a woman's world?" And I looked at him and I said, this is the first time I'm actually thinking about it. I never even realized that, but there is a truth to that. I'm not sure why, and that's a really great question in general, is why there are not more men who are in this world of kind of introducing singles and matchmaking. I'm not saying there are none, but there aren't as many. Definitely, as this man said, it's being a man in a woman's world, whatever that means.
Yeah, what does that mean? How did you take that?
I'm not sure. I
mean,
definitely,
it's true, as you mentioned, that you do see more women matchmakers. I can't think of any male matchmakers, official
right.
ones. I mean,
And it's also maybe that's why I don't want to be called a matchmaker, right? I don't know if I'm a
you
more
can you can start a new trend.
maybe. I have no problem. I mean, I don't know, maybe women are more intuitive. Maybe it's always been the quote unquote yenta. Maybe there's that fiddler on the roof kind of feel to the matchmaker, find me someone. Maybe women are more relationship oriented in general. Maybe they have more time. I don't know. I'm just making stereotypes, but I really have no idea.
We're speaking with, he's a dating coach, he's a matchmaker, shotgun, call him what you like. He's called the Love Rabbi, and he's made 54 matches. He's trained over 30 other matchmakers, but he's also on TV. He's a TV and movie star as well. We'll talk about that too. Fascinating, Rabbi Yisroel Bernath in Montreal.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. Rabbi Yisroel Bernath joins us. He is a dating coach, matchmaker. He's in Montreal. He's been called the Love Rabbi. He's a film and television star, but he finds time to make many, many matches. Over 54. He's trained over 30 other matchmakers to help in that quest. We're taking some of your email questions. Here's a comment for you, Rabbi Bernath from BC. Your guest is a breath of fresh air. Most rabbis don't touch matchmaking with a 10-foot pole, and indeed often by a comment or worse prevent what would have been a successful marriage. Much continued tzlacha to the rabbi.
I actually think it's an important comment, and I thank you for that, because a lot of rabbis tell me that it's not good for business, they say, because then the single automatically associates you with all their, let's say, relationships that didn't work out. And so a lot of rabbis don't want to touch it. So I really appreciate someone saying that. And it is true. I've had my own share of issues over the years, but I say I do it for the Jewish people. So it really is Hashem's work.
Now, you're also on TV and movies. You were in Young Abraham, Mixed Blessings. You're in Kosher Love. Tell us about your I don't know when you find time for everything, to be a Chabad rabbi, and you're a chaplain, you're a matchmaker, and also a TV and movie star. So let's look when you find the time for everything, but let's look at your TV and movie career as well.
So you have time for whatever you want to have time for, right?
Right.
Zev, how do you have time for everything? How does
That's
anyone
true.
have time for everything?
I always say, I always tell the joke. They say Rip Van Winkle, after 40 years of sleep, when they woke him up, he said 5 more minutes. And that's my motto. I need 5 more minutes every day. Actually, need more than 5 minutes, but I don't get bored. Thank God, I don't have time to get bored.
I'll tell you, Rabbi Akiva Eger said that with 5 minutes, he became a Talmud Chacham. He became a scholar with 5 minutes, because it was 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there that made him the scholar. And so even now, I was
the Vilna Gaon, he says, I think between Mincha and Meyer, when you did the learning, was 5 or 10 minutes. He goes, you can Vilna, you can be a Gaon too. If you want, you can be a Gaon. And that's extra 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, makes a difference. Absolutely correct. But can you
just look at what time we're having this interview? So there's time for everything.
But so where do you find the 5 minutes to be a movie actor? How did that come about?
That I'm not sure. It just kind of happened. It started off when I was a kid. I had a dream that I wanted to create some kind of animation or something for Jewish kids that would rival Disney. And so I always had this in my mind that one day I would get involved in a project, and I had an opportunity about 15 years ago to get into that was my first project, kind of my first opening into, let's say, quote unquote, Hollywood, coming to Quebec, where there are tremendous tax credits and tax benefits and grants for animation here that the Quebec government gave. And I said, hey, maybe we can do this. And I had teamed up with a group of people and got some seed money, and we put together this incredible animation that maybe a lot of your listeners had seen. It's been out for years now, called Young Abraham, the story of Avram's life according to the Medrash. And I mean, we even did a run at the time on DVD for the Frum Market. It went much further than that. It was actually bought out by some big studios, and actually
Which studios bought out the Young Abraham?
It was one of NBC's subsidiary studios that bought it.
And are they still distributing it?
Yeah, they still have it. And it's one of those, now they ended up taking our models. I mean, if you want to talk about animation, we can talk about, they ended up taking our models and doing other things with them, because once you buy an animation, especially if it's a 3D animation, the CGI system, you actually get the models, you get various elements and scenes and things that we had worked on. So
when's Young Isaac coming out?
After that, I said, you know what? I did it. That was my dream as a child. I lived my childhood dream. Now let's move on to something else. The funny thing is that I had been involved in a number of projects after that. We did the story of David HaMelech that never was released for nothing to do with me, but it was some political issues having to do with in Hollywood. We can talk about the politics are insane, and to actually get something.
Wait, so you made a film for Hollywood and then it didn't meet their woke standards?
It wasn't that, it was pre-woke. It had to do with particular funding and different people who owned rights to certain things. It was beyond me. It really had nothing to do with me. And then just recently, I did the story of Shimshin. It actually just came out a few days ago.
Oh, and where is it? Is it available on DVD? Is it online?
I was really proud. Again, we're fast forwarding. The technology is so good on CGI now. I really wanted something for Frum children. That was really my initial goal with Young Abraham. Young Abraham was a $1.8 million budget. There was no way I could do a $1.8 million film for the Frum market. But fast forward 10 years, about 5 years ago, I was approached by Chaim Hershkowitz, who has this really great streaming site called Tovido. And he said, why don't we try doing it? Technology has changed. Let's see if we can take your experience and what you've done over the years, and let's try to do something. So it's not quite to the level of, let's say, Young Abraham, but I would say it's probably the best thing that's ever come out specifically for Frum kids, using the Medrash in a way that hasn't been used before, bringing the story of Shimshin, which is such an important story, bringing it to life. And so I'm really proud of it. And it happens to be randomly that we're having this interview, and it just came out just a few days ago.
So let me just ask you this question. So where'd you raise the $1.2 million from? That's not so easy to do.
It was 1.8 million. So it was raised with a big mix. So like I said, one of the people don't know this, but in Quebec, the Quebec government wanted and still wants to be the leader in animation, and in a lot of big Hollywood studios bring their special effects studios to Quebec, to where I live. And it happens to be where I live. There's a lot of people, even all around the area that I live in. I know so many people in the animation world, in the movie world, in special effects. One of the joys of being Chabad is, they say, join Chabad, see the world. But it's not just see the world. You see parts of the world and people, and you get involved in communities that you would have never imagined. Well, I kind of landed on a film community that is right here in my neighborhood, with lots of people that are very knowledgeable in the industry, and Hollywood studios that do a lot of animation. So if you put minimal amount of capital, the Quebec government meets that sometimes up to 80%. So we only had to actually raise $400,000 for it.
Amazing. That's not a small piece of change either. But let's take Menachem, patiently waiting. Menachem in Maplewood, New Jersey. Go ahead, Menachem. You have a question for Rabbi Bernath?
Yes, a tremendous show as always. Good to know. Rabbi, you do the work you're doing. There's no denying that the work that you're doing is so critical to our future. Is it possible that you can formulate some kind of a program for other rabbis to follow your plan and to be able to duplicate your successes. Also, as a corollary, I'm sure many times, some of the matches that you put together don't work out. I guess as a result, do you counsel these people who you've originally put together to try to get them back in the right frame of mind of dating, and do you help them in their future dating? Thank you.
Menachem, thank you for that question. That is a fantastic question. I would love to help other rabbis do what I'm doing. Any rabbi, any community leader, any good, willing person that has contacted me, I have tried my best to help them, give them all my best practices, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we need as many people as possible doing this good work. On the second part of your question, I definitely spend a lot of time on education. I would say that even more than the, let's say, the matchmaking element now, I spend a lot of time on education. Our singles need to be educated, and even more so, our couples need to be educated. I'll tell you something shocking, Menachem and Zev. There is no premarital program for rabbis in any denomination of the Jewish community that exists. I was shocked to find this out. I said, I'm doing a lot of weddings now because it kind of comes with the territory that I actually, this summer, I performed about just from Shavuos until Rosh Hashanah, about 14 weddings. So I consider that a sizable amount, enough that
very nice.
When I'm standing under the chuppah and I'm looking at this couple and I'm actually making a bracha, I'm blessing their union, and I'm thinking to myself, what did I do? Why? Because I have smicha. It gave me the right to bless their union. Why do I have the right to bless these people? And with the divorce rate the way it is, even in the frum community, which we don't have to talk about tonight.
But by the way, some people say, Rabbi Bernath, some people say the divorce crisis is even greater than the shidduch of the
absolutely
marrying crisis.
And I think that we rabbis are the first line of defense. And we need to set up our couples with a toolbox. We need to set up our couples with at least the tools to be able to start and develop a long-lasting and loving relationship. And so I went out to see. I figured I can't be the only one that's doing weddings and wants a premarital program. And I found out that in every single denomination, in Orthodox, in all the denominations within the Orthodox world, and in Reform, Conservative, there is not one premarital program. I'll even tell you another thing I found out. In many states, you actually, when you go to get your license, many states have two options. If you have a letter that's signed by your officiant that says you went through premarital program, it will be significantly reduced, the price of that license. There are rabbis all over America that are signing letters to couples saying that they did premarital program and they did nothing. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about right now is trying to develop and design a premarital program for couples. I've looked at a lot of the really great programs that are out there. There are many, not Jewish, but there are many great programs out there. We don't have to totally reinvent the wheel, but I think that's something that's a huge need in our community.
Now, do you have a situation where you made a match and doesn't work out and they're both angry at you? Because that's, I guess, one of the dangers of doing matchmaking.
Absolutely.
Things go smooth, right? So,
oh yeah,
is that a concern? Or maybe some rabbis don't want to get involved because they're concerned if it doesn't work out, who they're going to blame? The rabbi.
I think a lot of rabbis don't want to get involved for that reason. Like, one rabbi told me, I said this in the beginning of the show, it's not good for business. It's not good for the rabbi business.
Here's an email question. I've been a matchmaker on SYAS. I don't know what that is.
Saw you at Sinai.
For over 10 years, and Baruch Hashem, I've made more than 20 successful matches there. How do you advise matchmakers like myself to deal with singles who have been members of mine for more than 5 years, and many, especially the guys, have gotten hundreds of matches each year, and yet they're still looking? Do you recommend the matchmaker asking them to switch matchmakers for better luck or a new approach? Supposedly, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. Personally, I feel most singles who dated hundreds and haven't gotten married have some issue they need to deal with. What do you think of that?
if I can be blunt,
Go ahead. Speak
there's
your mind.
some people are just not ready for the relationship, and you don't have to work for them if they're not ready for a relationship. It's okay to say to them, you're not ready, don't clog up the system.
But something you never know. Listen, I'll tell you a story. I was on a cruise, had to be about 35 years ago. It was a Pesach cruise. And I was doing a TV show, and there was a man there in his 50s, never married. And I asked him, are you married? And he goes, every woman he pointed, that's my wife. On the 7th day of Pesach, he meets a young lady from the Upper West Side of Manhattan in her 30s. Okay, he meets her the 7th day of Pesach. The boat docks on Friday. They have the first date on Sunday, and I went to the wedding Thursday night with the band of the boat, the rabbi from the one they got married 4 or 5 days later. So you never know.
Well, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a story that I would be proud of. I'm not saying that it's a. What I'm saying it's not proud of is, well, what's marriage? I mean, we can start getting into some very deep and difficult questions here as to, in many places, if you are an officiant in most states in the United States, or you are an officiant in, let's say, here in Quebec, you cannot do a wedding without filing it at least 21 business days beforehand. And there's a reason for that. This whole idea of the shotgun wedding, so to speak, is not, I don't know if that's what we're looking for.
Bob, this is not a shotgun wedding. In fact, this was 34 years ago. I happened to be at an event where I met relatives of this individual that's still married with kids, so
I'm happy.
It's not a typical situation. I agree.
I don't know if that story happened today. If I would, so what, and again, I'm 34 years ago, it's a wonderful story. I'm proud of them. They should live and be well. I don't know if that story happened today, if I would be as proud.
Okay. But did you ever consider, by the way, blending your Love Rabbi skills? You have a passion for film, for movies, maybe a reality TV show, The Love Rabbi. I think could do very well.
I actually, I don't know if you know, but Netflix is making a show right now called Jewish Matchmaking. And I was the first person that they were really pursuing when they did it. I this is a whole world that I knew nothing about. At the end, I end up declining for a lot of reasons. The primary reason was a lot of it was scripted. I was shocked at how much of it was scripted. And I said, look, I'm a real rabbi. I have integrity. I'm not, if you can get anybody, what do you need me for to do a scripted show?
Because you're an actor. They figured you're an actor, right? You're
right. Well, guess what? I'm actually, I remember I was once on set for a movie, and I walk on, and the director looks, he's like, oh my gosh, you look like a real rabbi. Where did they find you? Like, shocked. Here I am.
Do you get calls to play the role of a rabbi in lots of different movies or television shows?
So yeah, so I ended up, it's interesting, the community I live in is a huge filmmaking community. So there's a lot of movies that are done in Canada. I don't know if you know that. And so I had done a few movies, and then I ended up getting unionized. And so I'm the only Orthodox person that I know of right now that is unionized in Canada for roles. So I often don't take the roles. It has to be a particular type of movie, but I have been able to take some smaller roles, some larger roles on different sets as a result of being unionized, which is a whole other conversation on its own.
That means you have a speaking role.
Yes, exactly. You have to have a number of speaking roles to get unionized.
Now, by the way, it doesn't exist anymore. There used to be a group called HAG, Hasidic Actors Guild.
No way.
Lifshitz, who starred in a lot of the TV shows when they needed a Hasidic, actor or rabbi, so they called him and he got them. And there were a bunch of people that came from a Hasidic background that they incorporated into the movies. In fact, I remember there was one Unsolved Mysteries. There was a situation where you had a killing at the Masifta of Long Beach many years ago. He was in there. I remember seeing him in the Maid of Angel Rabbi Jacob. So they used a lot of these actors from the Hasidic actors, but I don't think it exists. Maybe you can revive it.
One of the reasons why I actually say yes to some of these roles, if I'm able to, is because I'm so happy that they're actually finding and wanting authentic roles within the Jewish community. It's interesting because within Hollywood, a lot of different communities, you cannot show a particular community without certain authenticity to it. And the Jewish community never really got that properly, especially because there's so many Jews in Hollywood and they think they know the Orthodox community and they think they know Hasidic. And we know good and well how misrepresented we've been over the years in various films and various shows, and how terrible things. I mean, not long ago, there was a show of which there was a Hasidic man that wouldn't get a pig valve from a heart from a pig valve, and that was a huge deal. And we all know that that's absolutely not true according to halacha, and that just shows us in such a terrible light. So sometimes
it's gotten worse. It's gotten worse these days with the portrayal of Orthodox Jews and the Hasidim in film. It was better. There was a movie, A Stranger Among Us. I don't know if you remember that with the big Hollywood actress. Her name slips me. Where they portrayed it in a much more sympathetic light. Today, it's different. It's a different world out there today.
Yeah, it's much harsher. And I can tell you, I've been on sets where the fact that I was there and I was authentic, I was able to say to the producer or director, "This is not the right way to do it. I'm here. Let's do it the right way."
Now, when you're on a movie set, and I'm asking if you ever put on your Hasidic hat and say, "Would you put on tefillin?"
I have.
That happened on the.
I have. Oh, sure. Come on.
Tell us the story.
I am a Chabad Rabbi.
That's what I'm saying. I want you to blend all the elements together. Tell us an interesting story of an interesting personality that on the set that you got to put on tefillin.
So I've had some interesting conversations. Unfortunately, when you're on a set, because I'm bound by very strict rules, I can't actually talk about, but I have had the opportunity of putting on tefillin with some very famous people because I've been on sets.
Yeah. Right, and I figured as much because you have to incorporate all three together. So,
oh yeah, I have some really great stories.
But you can't say them on there with.
Unfortunately, I can't. One day when I leave the guild and I'm not unionized anymore, I will be able to share some really amazing stories over the years.
I want to get back to the Netflix, because you said that you turned down being on Jewish matchmaking. They have an Indian matchmaking show. You turned down.
So it's the same producers as Indian matchmaking. They're in the process of doing Jewish matchmaking. I do believe they did find 2 or 3 from matchmakers who are doing it.
But you say it's scripted. It's not real. It's they tell you what to say, what to do.
So there were a number of different situations that, because when you negotiate, I mean, it was an insane amount of negotiation, the contract, especially being a lead role. And I had to get a specific agent that specialized, a lawyer that specialized in this. And there were particular scenarios that the agent was presenting to them. And they said, well, no, that could be a scenario. And I said, there's absolutely no way that I would, I'm a real rabbi. I have, this is not, I'm not a movie star. I know that obviously it's very hard. There was a tremendous amount of money attached to it. There's a tremendous amount of notoriety attached to it, but it doesn't mean that I would renege on my values for that. And so I turned it down.
No, good for you that you stood for your principles. Do they respect you when you turn it down for religious reasons? Say it goes against my morals to do.
Oh, they thought it was just about money. It's amazing how the Jewish stereotype really came out. They thought
they said to you, they say, why are you turning down? I'll give you more money.
They replied to us with they give a 30% increase. And I said, it's not about money.
You said, turn that. I said, okay, I'll add 30% more to the salary.
They were trying to win me over with dollars. And I said, no. And they added even more money on top of that. It ended up being like about, at the end, about 60% more than the original amount.
Can you give us a dollar amount so you can illustrate to the audience? Let's say what we're talking about. Dollars.
Well, it's per episode, per season, per amount of minutes. But it was a tremendous, I mean, because it was a full season, we're talking about into the many 6 figures.
Wow, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And you turn it down for your beliefs and your morals.
Yes.
Call it kavod. It's nice. You don't find so many people doing that. Now, were those scenes or those movies would you felt would compromise your Judaism? What about those movies didn't you like?
Which ones?
that you turned down. You said that you turned down being on it because it goes against your moral compass. What kinds of roles?
Well, for example, anything that is not kosher. If I don't consider it kosher, I won't be on it. So there's sometimes they want a rabbi role on a film that I don't think is a proper film for a rabbi to be on.
Let's be a little more elaborate. What, for example, what do they want you to do in one of the movies?
No, it's not necessarily what they want me to do. It's that I would be on the same film as, let's say, something that was rated R or is rated, even to me today rated PG-13. I don't know if I would go on a film like that. I just did a scene on a French. It just happened to be random on a French film, a pretty well-known French film that's coming out now, and that was like there was nothing wrong about it. This is like it's so hard to decide these things. I'm just giving you a little bit of.
Right, I'm trying to figure out. If it's PG, it could go either way. It could be PG for a variety of reasons.
Right.
So you look at the script before you say no, or just you heard that it's PG and you say.
I always look at the script before I say yes or no. Absolutely, I'll read through the script. I'll read through my role, and so this was the first time I was on a film, and there was a woman on the film that I didn't feel was dressed properly, which generally I would not be on a film like this. And I just realized that in the French media is much, much more anti-Semitic than the English media. I don't know if you know this, but it's really, really anti-Semitic.
In what way?
There, there's just ingrained tropes about Jews. I mean, I don't know if you saw like The Adventures of Rabbi Jacob or
I saw The Adventures of Rabbi Jacob. That was a great film.
Right. So that was, let's say, a good film, and that was a very famous French actor. So in general, there's various tropes that are not necessarily good for the Jews. And I felt that this was an opportunity to be in that world because I could be. And I decided at the end to be on the film and to do the scene, even though it was maybe on a more American style film, I wouldn't have done it.
But do you ever consider the fact that if you take a role of the film, which might be objectionable to a small degree, again, everything is relative and everything you can determine. Do you ever think that maybe being there, you can influence people on the movie set, maybe even people watching the film may be inspired when they see you?
I'm sure somebody can go to a nightclub and influence people there. It doesn't mean I'm going to go to the nightclub.
Well, you had Rabbi Yisroel Grossman, the disco rabbi, who goes into discotheques and gets people out. So
I'm proud of him. That's his choice. I don't know if I'm not a disco rabbi and I'm not going into a discotheque to influence people. I mean, there's places you can be the beach rabbi and go on the beach and influence people. You have to draw the line somewhere, and especially if you're someone who's out there. And if you really represent what is Torah true Judaism, there has to be, yes, I agree. I walk a fine line. Maybe I'm out there a little more than others, but I think that there needs to be integrity, and we really have to think about, what is important. And so over the years, I've consulted with senior rabbis and people who I really respect. And I've been able to create a value system that I really, really try not to break.
Now, you mentioned that there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that you turned down. Did you ever consider, or did you ever try to get them to tone down some scenes or make some changes to make it palpable that you could appear in the film?
It was very early on. From what I understand, I didn't really keep track of what's going on, so I can't tell you this as a fact. But from what I've heard through, I would say, legitimate sources, they've changed a lot of the tune because I think they wanted a certain legitimacy. So I was the first one that they had contacted, and they really spent a lot of time with me. But I think now they realized to get what they want, they're going to have to renege. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on now, but it seems like they did get some really good people, and I'm happy for them. And I'm happy that there was that. I was hoping that, but it just happened to be, I think because I was the first person approached, I had to be the one to break the ice.
But did you say to them, if you make certain changes, then I will appear?
Oh yeah, we went back and forth quite a bit.
You have an agent that represents you too?
I have to.
Right.
Welcome to our life. Welcome to the life of Hollywood. You have to.
Our guest is Rabbi Yisroel Bernath. He's multifaceted, multi-talented. He has a passion for film. He's made films. He's been on TV. He's been in movies. He's also a dating coach and matchmaker. He's been called the Love Rabbi. Rabbi Yisroel Bernath is our guest. He's also Chabad, which means he's able to blend and integrate all those talents into helping people and spreading Judaism.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Our fascinating guest is Rabbi Yisroel Bernath, the spiritual director of Chabad of NDG. What does NDG stand for, by the way, Rabbi Bernath?
Notre Dame de Grace. You'd rather call it NDG.
I pronounce it better. And the Jewish chaplain of Concordia University, but he's here tonight or this morning on his basis of being the Love Rabbi. He's a dating coach and matchmaker. He's a Chabad rabbi. Not only is he a film and television star, but also a producer, multi-talented. The more I talk to you, Rabbi Bernath, the more impressed I'm getting. And you're juggling so many different things, and you really stand by your principles, which I guess is very refreshing in today's day and age. Because you started saying to me before that some of the producers seem to be shocked that you walked away from all that kind of money and the hundreds of thousands of dollars because of your principles. So it had some impact. Are you dealing with mainly Jews in the film industry and the TV industry where you are in Montreal?
I would say actually not. Mostly now not Jews. I mean, I would say that, there's always some Jews around, and they're always, they have a comment or two. But the main people in the film industry that I'm dealing with are not Jewish.
Interesting, because in Hollywood, you still have a lot of Jews in Hollywood who, in fact, Jews invented Hollywood.
Yeah, I think less and less actually that are in particular roles as far as like casting and producing and those kind of roles of people who I would be dealing with. They're mostly not, and often they're very respectful, very, very respectful. Really, I hate to say it, but sometimes the Jews that aren't as respectful, and the people who aren't Jewish are more respectful.
No, that's unfortunately the case, because if they know a little bit or they think they know, like you mentioned before, when they have roles for Orthodox rabbis or with Judaism, some of them think they know and they misrepresent it, and it comes out in the film where it's embarrassing, but yet that gets out there. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that the French films tends to be a lot more anti-Semitic than the English ones. And can you give us some examples of what you discovered, what you found, that they tend to be more? In what ways have you found it to be more anti-Semitic in the films?
I don't think it's necessarily the film, but it's just the media. The French media in general is not sympathetic to the Jewish cause. I'm not exactly, I can't pinpoint it. Maybe people who are more into, let's say, French culture can understand more of the nuance of that. But it's my observational opinion that from what I see is that there's often that kind of trope. There's a lot of stereotyping, there's a lot of othering in the French media. And so, like I said before, when I have an opportunity, I find that it's even more important to be in that medium.
No, it's important to be in the medium, and then the more they see. See, here's the thing that always intrigues me. We invented Hollywood, we invented the movie, and yet we're almost invisible. And when they do portray us, it's in a negative way. So you would think that we would have a much more representation in a positive way in these films and television shows. And can you point to any really Jewish television shows in the United States? I don't know what it's like in Canada, but the United States, maybe less than a handful you can come up with.
But I think there's also a certain like Hollywood-esque sacrilege. They like to portray Jews in a particular sacrilege form, right? I don't know, like I'm thinking the Woody Allen style kind of or Larry David style. So there is that, and so I think that actually it works. Having the Jews in Hollywood does not work to our benefit. And it's true that it did come from the Yiddish theater originally, but Hollywood is like the lowest form of Yiddish theater. Right? There were higher, more refined forms of Yiddish theater. That's not what Hollywood is.
No, but for a period of time in the 40s and 50s, they've written Jews out of Hollywood. They even
Mhm.
made movies such as Dirty Dancing, which took place in the Catskills, and they didn't mention the word Jew. Everybody knew it took place there. Yet other films also where they just didn't mention Jews. You would think and this is more on television, because on movies you do have more Jewish films, and you had the Dybbuk, and you had even uh you had you have films with Jewish content. There's even one from Canada with the Chavra Kaddishi. There's some wonderful films that have come out over the course of time. But as far as a TV show that portrays a Jewish family in a loving way, and with the exception of the Goldbergs in the 50s, I can't think of any that exists, and that's a shame, because you would think that they're portraying Black families and Asian families, that they should portray a Jewish family. It could be interesting.
Yeah, there have been a lot of really great documentaries, but I can't think of a TV show. You're right.
Documentaries, yes.
Yeah.
Television shows, no. And I'd like to see more, of that. And I think it have a positive impact, because young people who are not connected to Judaism, and you see that on campus, people come not
Mhm.
connected to Judaism, forget about Israel, where they have a negative image of Israel because of the way the media distorts it and portrays it. But even Judaism, if it would be portrayed in a more positive light on TV, I think more people will be turned on to Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's what Hollywood cares about. I mean, definitely maybe what you and I care about a little more, but not necessarily what they care about. But I agree with you, and I think that we have a good story to tell, a great story to tell.
Now, have you worked with any big movie actors in some of the films that you've been in, or television shows?
I have, yeah.
Are you able to tell us who they are? Okay, that you can tell us who.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I on those kinds of. I haven't had a major role on those films, so I haven't had necessarily any on-screen interaction with anyone. Let's say famous. I've been in films of which there were famous people, but not necessarily had any on-screen interaction. So it's nothing. It's not. It's not. Again,
Who?
for me,
Uh-huh.
it's not a big deal. I put myself out there, and maybe to my I'm trying to use a word that's not connected to demise, but to my demise, I put myself out there, and I get a lot of flack for it, I would say.
You got a lot of flack from where?
Sure.
From other Chabad
Sure.
rabbis, other Rabbanim, other
Other people,
rabbis?
they're like, well, maybe you're out there too much in the media, or you're looking for fame. What are you looking for? And the truth is, I'm not really looking for it. I don't really, it doesn't really, I like it. I enjoy it. I like being in front of the camera. There's no question about it. Especially recently, I've had, even some other opportunities of doing voiceover work. I really, really love playing particular roles and characters and animations and doing voiceovers, but it definitely feeds a part of me, but it's not like I'm looking for it.
John Voight, who's a big movie actor, he stars a lot in the Chabad telethons. You don't have one in Canada, I assume, right? I know they have one from LA and one in Long Island.
No, there isn't one here. No.
Maybe in your spare time make a Chabad telethon. But John Voight, and when I interviewed him, and I saw him at the Chabad show in Chernobyl, they used to have every year when they were around, and he's been very helpful to Chabad. He told me he wanted to play the role of the Baal Shem Tov. I have that on tape in one of the interviews we did with him. So I'm just wondering if, I think some of these actors, and maybe getting some of them behind them, it might be an interesting thing to have a major TV show or movie that's geared to Jewish themes. Some of these actors might be interested in being involved. John Voight just comes to mind because he mentioned he'd like to play the Baal Shem Tov.
That's funny. James Earl Jones is the only voice of God that I know.
Actually, the other one passed away, George Burns.
Yes, exactly.
He was Jewish. He played a Jewish role. Is there any role that you'd like to play in a movie, that any particular part that you would love to get a chance to portray?
I think that, there's been so many really amazing, there's been so many amazing films with regards to, looking at maybe other cultures and looking at Judaism as a subculture. I love to kind of tell the Jewish story. I love to be able to portray, perhaps, and this would be in our community a little controversial, but like the the role of Yosef or the role of Moshe. I always say, and people, I joke about it at my Shabbos table, but there's really truth. I love gossip. I really like gossip. I like talking. You and I are talking now. I like talking. I like gossip. And so a long time ago, in order to be able to feed my need for gossip, I started gossiping Torah. And there's a lot to gossip in the Torah. I mean, there's stories. I mean, definitely not a rated G story, the Torah. It's rated R in every way. And so, even at my Shabbos table, we're always talking about who's related to who and what happened to who and who did this to whom. And I love to be able to show the Torah in that way, like in the way that we as Jews look at the Torah. The Torah has been portrayed so often by others, not by us. It's our story, it's our narrative. With this, what you mentioned, this woke culture, everyone's talking about, you cannot personify someone who, it's not my story to tell. This is our story to tell, and we really have never told it.
Well, by the way, to me, the proof that the Torah was given by God and written by God is that, it has all the blemishes and all the stories, whether it's the fighting in the families or all kinds of relationships that are inappropriate. But the Torah is not afraid to say this is what it is. And if a publisher or a Jewish publisher, somebody else were to have written it, they would blot out all these parts, right? They would make it, different. So that's makes it authentic, that it's not afraid to deal with the things as they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the frum community who would not want Avram Avinu as a mechutin.
But look at Lot. Lot is the ancestor of Mashiach, the Messiah.
Exactly.
Can you imagine Lot, who has an incestuous relationship with his two daughters, and from him,
and there's even more. Yehuda and Tamar and right. David and Bathsheba. This is the whole lineage of Mashiach.
Correct. And then so you have to stop and think about it. But the Torah is teaching us a lesson. God's in control of the world, and He decides. And by the way, there's a whole, which I'm not going to get into tonight, which I love, the Ema Ban Smecha, which is written by Rabbi Tachtel. He was a great Haredi rabbi who unfortunately died at the end of the Holocaust, and he was anti-Israel as far as forming a state, and then he changed his mind. He wrote his book without any notes, without any sperm, without any holy books, and his basic thesis is the reason why the Messiah comes from a incestuous relationship. There are lots of forces in the world that want to undermine goodness, and by God, I guess, covering it in what seems to be, which is an incestuous relationships, you don't pay attention to it, was able to go. And he equates that to the state of Israel, where people say it's not the non-religious who built the land, some of the anti-religious that built the land, but it falls under the radar screen. They did the work. So it's an interesting book, and I recommend people to get, but that goes far beyond our conversation that we're having right now. So I want to get back to matchmaking. So that's a lot of people. I know people are having trouble meeting. In fact, Simchas Torah on the west side of Manhattan, you have hundreds of them. It used to be thousands of singles used to come. And remember in Borough Park years ago, also on 14th Avenue, you had thousands of singles looking for it. What advice can you give to whether it's parents that are listening right now or actually singles that are having trouble meeting? That what would you recommend to them would be a good way for them to meet others?
So I think so. First, to the parents. To the parents, I would say you cannot be hungrier than your children for their relationship. I have parents that call me all the time. Can you set up my child? But if my child knew I was calling you, they would kill me. Well, I'm very happy that you want your child set up, but I cannot set up your child until your child calls me. But your child is not 10 years old. They're in their 30s. I understand you want grandkids, but I'm really sorry for you. And I know it's really hard to hear this, but you can't be hungrier than them. They have to want it for themselves. So that's what I say to the parents. To the singles themselves, I mean, you're talking about the Upper West Side, because you mentioned it, it's just a Jewish version of Friends. And the level of platonic relationship that has happened there. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I just had it the other day where I thought of two people, and I'm like, and they're both on the Upper West Side. And I called up one, and the other one said, "Oh, I know them." I said, "Really? What's their favorite color?" No. I don't mean I know them that way. I mean like we met at I saw them at a party. Oh, so you saw them at a party and that's how you know them, because you saw them across the room? You don't know anything about them. No, but my friends know them. Okay. What do you know about them? Enough for a cup of coffee? And I think that it's so easy to rule out people, but these are the people that are in your circles, and these are the people who have similarities, and these are the people who understand your nuances. So why are you so fast because you saw them at an event, know nothing about them? You may have spoken to them at a speed dating for 4.5 minutes. You're so easy to just check them off. That's one of the problems I have with speed dating, is that it's, everyone, and again, this is basically what's happening out there, is they're going out there trying to find reasons why it's not going to work, because a lot of them get their hearts broken, and I understand, and I'm being very rough, but I'm also very compassionate. I understand. It's very hard to have your heart broken, and it's very hard. The more people you date, you start putting up these defense mechanisms, you start moving further away. It's hard. I get it. But that vulnerability is what's going to create the relationship. You can't put up an iron wall between you and another person and expect relationship to happen. You have to be a little bit vulnerable. You got to put yourself out there. And it could be that person who you went on a 4.5 minute date with one time at some random event or whatever else you're doing, or you saw at a party, because these are people who will understand you. And yes, you can connect on that instead of saying this person is platonic, so to speak, and not for me.
But there's another factor too, because I don't want to pick on the Upper West Side, but I'm going to use it because I know the joke is when you have Simchas Torah, it's called Zman Single Seinu. But here's what happens. You have parties or you have events where singles meet, and while they're talking to one, they're looking to see who else is out there. So they're not really paying attention because they're saying there's somebody better out there, somebody else I could meet. So they may walk away with lots of numbers, but their mind is that, hey, I can't commit because there may be somebody else out there that's bad. And the older they get, I think the more set in the ways they get.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. So often I'll set somebody up and they'll say, is there anyone else? Is there anyone else? No. Right now, this is the only person in the world for you. What do you mean, is there anyone else? What kind of question is that? Are you looking for someone, or is this a survey?
So how do we change the mindset? Because we have so many singles and older singles. I forget the divorced ones that are coming back onto the scene. So they originally were in the single scene. They get married, they get divorced. Some get divorced very quickly. I hear crazy stories, and they come back again to the scene where they're back where they started up again. And so you have this whole problem between those never married and those who are married and now divorced, and everybody wants to meet, but they're problems.
Yeah, there are. And I think that it starts off with a big culture change. I don't know an easy answer for this, but there is a cultural issue that's happening, and where everybody friend zoning, this kind of friend zoning, or like you said, they're at a party, they're saying hi and looking over the shoulder to see who the next person is. Or there was somebody from Toronto that went to New York to meet a young woman, and an hour into the date, she says, I'm sorry, I have another date now. And this guy flew from Toronto for her. And she was saying, well, this is the culture here. This is normal here. This is what's going on in New York. I mean, you're going to have many dates in one night. So it's kind of like they're setting up, and I don't understand. That's why I said that, the Upper West Side, and you and I are picking on it a little bit, but it's become like this version of Friends where everyone is just platonic, friend zoning. Nobody wants to actually have a serious relationship. So you think there's so many singles and there's so many possibilities, but the truth is they're kind of, instead of saying, is this a potential for me? They're kind of knocking off and saying this one, no, 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 and finding every reason, which could be true and could be fabricated, why it will or won't work for them. And what ends up happening over time is you get into this mode where it's just not working. Nothing works. And there's nobody out there for me. we're not looking for nobody. We're looking for one person.
Here's an email question for you. Rabbi, one, what percentage of your matches were secular couples versus religious couples? Two, Jonathan Pollard recently got engaged and he's almost 70. Would you make a match like that? What age range do you match? What's the oldest you've matched? Thank you, Mike.
Okay. So I don't know offhand what my average compared to secular versus religious. But I would say that overall, I do a lot more secular than religious, but I have been kind of dabbling into the religious world because there's a huge need for it now that I never knew about. And of course, look, you have to set up a lot of dates. Here's the thing with older singles. I would love to help older singles, and I think it's such an important thing. But every non-negotiable you need to have a lot of negotiables. If you have too many non-negotiables and no negotiables, there's nothing to talk to. There's nothing to negotiate. There's nobody. So a lot of older singles, because they've been single for a certain amount of time, they get very set in their ways. And it's very hard to be able to change that. So they want it this way. They want to be like this. They want it that. And they can't even think of they want theoretically to have the relationship, but practically they can't even think of being in the relationship. So I say to a lot of them, you have to clear out half of your closet. You have to sleep on one side of your bed. You have to sit at one chair at your table. You have to feel like there's something missing in your life. And until you can feel like there's something missing in your life, you're not going to really, theoretically, you want someone, but practically you don't, because you don't want to give up those comforts that you've become accustomed to.
Remind me, my father always told this story about a 56-year-old bachelor never married. They kept hounding him. You're going to get married. You're going to get married. So finally he says, I'm 50% there. And they go, wonderful. He goes, yes, I'm ready. The question is, are they ready or not?
Yeah.
That's the real question. Our guest is Rabbi Yisroel Bernath, spiritual director of Chabad of NDG, Jewish chaplain of Concord University. He's here, and the fact that he's the Love Rabbi, that's what he's been dubbed, made over 54 matches. He's trained over 30 matchmakers. He's a film and television star, and he is doing an outstanding job, and he's somebody who stands for his principles. So fascinating personality.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back, our final segment with the Love Rabbi. He's a dating coach, matchmaker. He's a Chabad Rabbi. He's a movie and television star. He's produced animated specials, multi-talented, and he's not afraid to stick up for his principles and takes a lot of heat for being in movies and being the Love Rabbi. And he's turned down positions in movies that he felt goes against his moral compass. Can you tell us, by the way, there's a favorite story that you have in matchmaking, something that you think that wasn't going to work out, then it did, or you put a lot of work and effort? And I'm sure you must have some interesting stories from doing this matchmaking.
Great question. A story that wasn't going to work out that did or didn't. Nothing comes to mind at the moment. Maybe something will come. Let's continue, and perhaps something will come.
I thought, are you keeping a diary of different ones that?
I do. I do have some written down, and I have written some stories over the years, but nothing is coming to mind at the moment for some reason.
Shalom, Rabbi Moshe Rice. Have you read the great work, Memories of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? I've long thought that it might make a great movie. Would you consider making a movie of this fantastic story?
I so agree. I love the memoirs. And I think I always said that the previous Rebbe who wrote them, he should have gotten a Pulitzer Prize with just how descriptive he was. And even in his Yuman and his diary, the way he would describe various scenes that happened in his life. And yes, I agree with that email. I do think that would make an amazing movie.
No, it certainly would be. By the way, I started asking you this before, and you mentioned Netflix with the Jewish matchmaking. Have you considered getting people to back you up and doing maybe a weekly series, whether it's television or radio, matchmaking, a Jewish matchmaker on the air?
So now I don't know. The answer is yes. I have actually a company here in Canada that's been bugging me for a little while to do a series. There's one series that I want to do. It's not the series they want to do, but if somebody wanted to do the series, then I think I would go with it. And that is, I think that marriage is a lost art. And I think that there's a lot of young people today, they come from divorced homes. They don't have good role models for relationships. And I would like to do a series where I go with young people and I interview couples that have been married 50 years plus to find out what the secret is. And kind of capturing the old world, what marriage was, and connecting it to a younger generation. You see, if somebody would do that, and I have approached a couple of, I just approached someone now, a producer for a big company with this idea, and they didn't say no right away. They were like interested, and they wanted. So we're gonna do a pilot of it just to kind of see how it would go and like how it would work out. And it's obviously also finding the right couples, these older couples, finding it's not easy to be somebody who lends well to the screen. So we're going to try a pilot and see if it goes. So that's something that I think would be amazing. It's kind of recapturing what marriage, what the essence is.
That's a good idea, even though a lot of people, here's the interesting part, where human relationships are so complex.
Yeah.
So you have couples that may have stayed together because they just didn't get divorced. It wasn't part of their culture. COVID, I think, changed a lot of things with people who were long-term married, didn't stay married because they were in the house more with each other than ordinarily. I know one rabbi who purposely went to the office during COVID, didn't want to be home with his wife all day long. So relationships are complex, but I would say that maybe some of the singles that see the parents struggling or divorce, it may have an impact where they want to avoid that, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. We also live in a throwaway age where something doesn't work, you throw it out. So divorce is much more prevalent because one minute a problem comes up, get rid of him or her. And the same thing maybe in relationships, something comes up, okay, I'm out of here. And this may be part of the problem.
That's part of the problem, is that young people today don't have that role model. They don't have anyone to look at. So they know this doesn't work, but what does work? We know what doesn't work. We know your parents, let's say, if they were divorced or didn't have a healthy relationship, they didn't work. But what does work? And it's kind of going and recapturing. Anytime I see a couple that I consider, that has been married, if I see them together walking, if I see them in the store, I will approach them and say, what's the secret? How long have you been married? What's the secret? The other day, I was in the store here, and if you go in Montreal here, we have this area called Côte Saint-Luc, and they call it Côte Saint-Juif, Côte Saint-Jew. And there's all these elderly Jewish couples, and I was in the mall there, and I see this elderly couple. They're walking together, holding hands, and you can see, there's a chaim, there's a beauty to. So I walked over, Shalom Aleichem, who are you? What's your name? Talking to them. They're married 68 years.
Wow.
Married 68 years. They met right after the war. They met in a DP camp, and they stayed married, kids, grandkids, great grandkids. And so I asked them, so what's the secret? And they're looking at each other, and he's laughing and she's laughing, and you can't really get, but then they had some real good pearls. She says patience. And so I pried her a little bit, like, what does that mean? What does patience mean? And she said, you have to know that it's not going to always be the way you want, and it's not going to be as fast, and it's not going to be as, life doesn't work that way. You have to be patient, not only with your spouse, but be patient about life together. And I thought there was a real gem there. Like, that's what I'm talking about, just capturing those little gems that people who've been married that many years, they carry those gems with them. And I think it's a lost art.
No, that's certainly showing the role model. But I was thinking more where you take your matchmaking skills and actually show it on the air, maybe showing couples and guiding them through like a reality type show.
So,
it can even be scripted based on
there's a
reality.
show that came out. There's a show that CBC just released. It came out on September 24th. So how long ago was that? 3 weeks ago. And it's a show that we were working on for about 2.5 years. I was not the producer or director. I was just the matchmaker, and they casted quite a number of a huge net of singles. They chose 4 singles, and let's just say, for practical purposes, it was like, let's try to find the hardest people to match up and see what this guy can do. And each one was crazier than the next. I mean it with all love. I mean it, and I have to say, when I saw the film, I didn't see it till it came out, and maybe that was part of my mistake. Other films I've been part of, I've had a lot more editorial control. To me, it looked like a freak show. I mean, yes, is it entertaining? Incredibly entertaining.
But even more, did the matches work out? That's the question.
You can't match these people up. These people are impossible to match up. But the thing is, the normal people, so to speak, I don't know what normal is. Normal is a dial on the dryer, right? Normal, or washing machine. But the quote unquote normal people, they don't make for good TV. So if you want, yes, is this show highly entertaining? It's highly entertaining. Will it teach you anything? Absolutely not. Am I proud of it? Absolutely not. But it is very entertaining. Yeah, they're crazy people, and I try to do my best, and it shows this kind of process of me, being very excited about matching them up, to like basically at the end saying like there's no hope for these people. But it's called Meet, Pray, Love. I don't know,
And it's, I would assume it's all Jewish individuals that were.
They're all Jewish people. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And what is it? Just a one-shot deal, or is it an ongoing series that they want to do?
So now, so basically, it was the sequel to Kosher Love. So it's done by CBC. It was the sequel to it, and now they're getting so much positive feedback because it's highly entertaining. But is that what I'm a rabbi, right? Is that what I'm here for? Am I here to be highly?
Well, let me ask you a question though, and maybe a lot of them will never be matched. But if one match comes out of all of those shows, is it worth it?
Yes.
Okay, I knew you were going to say that. So that's why it's worth to go through a lot of ones that may never make it, but you never know what.
I think they're caricatures of other people. So people do kind of see themselves. A lot of singles, they're getting a lot of feedback now since the film has come out, where a lot of singles do see a portion of themselves through that. So I do see at the end that hopefully somebody can learn what not to do or what not to be like in order to be able to find that person. But not something I'm proud of, that particular.
Rabbi Yisroel, we're proud of Rabbi Yisroel Bernath because he's not only a Chabad rabbi, he is a dating coach, a matchmaker. He's the Love Rabbi. He's a film and television star. He's produced animations, and he's not afraid to stand up for his principles, getting flagged for being in the movies and losing money by not appearing in certain films that he feels is not to his moral compass. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for what you're doing. Continued success. If people want to reach out to you, how can they do so?
They can email me, is probably the easiest way. rabbi@jewishndg.com. I'm also on all the social channels. I have a Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. They can DM me on any of those places, and I'm try to be pretty LinkedIn. I try to answer as quick as I can.
And well, LinkedIn is a very appropriate terminology for trying to get people to get married.
Yeah.
Trying to find the link, not the missing link, but to find a link, an important link.
Exactly.
Thank you for being here with us. Look forward to having you back. I really enjoy. We have to have you back, and maybe we'll get you to do a radio show, live matchmaking on the air too.
Absolutely, that would be a good idea. It was great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Some good questions, some good comments. Thank you so much, and continued success.
Thank you.
When we come back.